All right, welcome back, and thank you very much. You sent in lots of great questions for our guest today, Ben Carlson, who is playing, of course, Hamlet for us this year. So let's begin at the beginning. Ben, it's your first season here at the festival, but you've done lots of work in theaters across Canada, into the United States. Tell us just a little bit about yourself.
Well, I've been working professionally for 12 or 13 years now, and yeah, I've spent quite a bit of time at the Shaw Festival, but I've also worked in most of the major regional theaters across the country. Not all of them, but a good chunk of them. I've also done a certain amount of work in the United States. I've been in Philadelphia a couple of times, and I've been in Chicago. And in Chicago, I played Hamlet,
right?
Which was,
and you won an award.
I got an award for that.
Well, you know what's astounding about that? I mean, that the Chicago community would be generous enough to let this foreign actor, this guy who's coming in from out, takes the best role possible for that year, and they give him an award. It's fantastic.
It was very much in the spirit of the company for that production, who were amazingly welcoming. I never felt like an outsider. I was welcomed into their community, and I very much felt that way. I happened to go to the award ceremony just because I thought, oh, that's a nice chance to visit Chicago again. It was bowled over when I won, and I felt very, embraced. It was very nice. It was a nice thing.
Okay, so one of the questions we got asked is, you've played this part before. I mean, very few actors get to play Hamlet ever. Yeah. Much fewer actors get to play it twice. What's it like coming to this part a second time, a new director, a different space?
It's very interesting. Obviously, the space plays a major part in kind of examining the role for a production. I mean, the Chicago Shakespeare Theatre is 550 approximately seats. The Stratford Festival Theatre is about 1,800.
And 30, yeah.
1,830. So it's you have to imagine it in larger dimensions. It becomes a larger performance. It can't help but. You have to in order to fill the room. The most interesting thing for me in rehearsing it a second time is that I didn't want to lay on too much too early what I had done the first time. That is, I didn't want to just come in with a performance that had been crafted over the month or so rehearsal that we did in Chicago, and transplant that into a different production. I didn't think that would be appropriate, and everybody would have to adapt to me, and I would much rather be in our production of Hamlet and find what that is as it goes. Now that poses a couple of other problems in rehearsing, that sometimes you have a very strong instinct to go a certain way, right, and then you think you have to check it, and it's finding out when you can allow that instinct to flow and when you can revamp or reevaluate the scene and go on a completely new path. It's a very liberating thing. I recommend it for any actor to get a chance to play particularly one of these big, colossal roles in the Shakespeare canon. If you want to do them more than once if you get a chance to.
So you want to do it more than once if you get a chance to. We have a question here about what was it like to audition for Hamlet? I mean, the first time, and then the second time with Adrian.
Well, it was very interesting. They asked for, when I first auditioned for Terry Hands, who directed the production in Chicago, he said, just come in familiar with the play, and we'll have you read some. So I did for him something I would never ever do in a professional audition. I did the to be or not to be speech, which I would think would be professional suicide if you were doing anything except auditioning for Hamlet. And I said to him, I would never do this in any other situation, but since in this production I am going to have to say these words, why don't we try it? And he listened to them and he said, yes, it's all right. Let's work it a little bit. And we worked it, and then he had me read one of my favorite speeches in the play, which is Speak the Speech, I Pray You as I Pronounced It to You, trippingly on the tongue, which is known as Hamlet's advice to the players. And it's just a marvelous piece of prose. Much of Hamlet is prose being different from the poetry, the iambic pentameter. A lot of the play is in prose, and he wanted to see if I had a facility for it. When I auditioned for it here, it was slightly different. Adrian and I just talked about the play because he knew I had done it before. So he wanted to hear what I had to think, what I had to say about the play, and what I thought about the play, and what I thought about having done it. And then we did a different speech. We did Oh, What a Rogue and Peasant Slave Am I, which is maybe Hamlet's second big, massive soliloquy. They were both extremely generous, and I got the part both times, which is,
yes, it's good batting average.
I didn't expect to get it once, so I was, I felt pretty good about it.
All right, there's a question here from a 15-year-old, and I like it because it's a way of introducing ourselves into the play. And of course, we're all familiar with the play, but you are immersed in it. And the question is, will Noble's production of Hamlet be engaging for 15-year-old boys? My friends and I know what ideas and actions will keep us in our seats, says Scott Knight.
Well, Scott, I would say, having done it once before and having seen it a number of times, seen Hamlet, and been in, I was also in a production of Hamlet at the National Arts Centre in Ottawa. I played Horatio for Tom Rooney's Hamlet, which is interesting because Tom Rooney is playing Horatio for my Hamlet this time.
I hope he's being as generous.
He's an extraordinarily generous guy and a great actor, and it's terrific that he's in it. But my experience every time with student audiences in this play has been a positive one, because I think students, 15-year-olds, boys particularly, but girls too, I think they love Hamlet because they identify with him, because Hamlet is incredibly smart. He's smart and he's apprehensive of the world. He, in all senses of that word, he is, in some ways, he looks at the world and knows what's wrong with it, and it bugs him, and he is not afraid to speak his mind, which very much appeals to the psyche of a teenager. You know, there are ways in which students appreciate Hamlet in a way that nobody else can, if that makes sense.
And it's a pretty screwed up world. As we were saying just before we started this broadcast, that like As You Like It and Romeo and Juliet, this is a play about a young person looking around saying to his parents, how did you make such a mess of this? Yeah. The state is almost at war. I mean, it's given to lechery, and the whole country is a bit of a mess from his point of view. So you're given a mission. You're given a mission by your father, the ghost. And he says, revenge. And so it's a twist on a revenge tragedy. You manage to kill a lot of people, but boy, does it take you a long time to off your uncle.
It takes a long time, and of course, the big question about that is, why don't you just go and kill your uncle? Well, that's a question that people have been poring over for 400 years, and it's actually one of the greatest strengths of this play, and I would argue of all four of the central Shakespearean tragedies, which is that Shakespeare leaves out a crucial piece of information. A piece of information that in some of the source plays that Shakespeare used, he would have been left in, which is there's a plot reason why Hamlet delays. But it's not given in Hamlet, and that little leaving out is actually what solidifies in my mind Shakespeare as the greatest dramatist who ever lived. Because in doing that, he gives the actors and the audience something to think about and chew over, and there is something inexplicable about the human being. As great as Shakespeare was at exploring the human, there is always something inexplicable about him. And in those four tragedies particularly, I think he hits it. I think he captures it. And in Hamlet, that is the great question. Why does he wait? And I can't really answer it for you. I have my idea about why he waits. And every person who plays Hamlet has to answer that question. And every production of Hamlet has to answer that question. But the question is a vitally important one for the audience to discern. And rather than give it away, I'd rather people came in.
Well, and you know, I often say, and I believe that one of the reasons Shakespeare is such a genius is he doesn't tell you the answer. He just comes up with damn good questions.
Yes, that's right.
Which we all have different answers for. The enigma is preserved, and that's a brilliant point you've made about the fact that even if there is an answer, he removes it from the space so that we keep asking the questions.
And as brilliantly incisive as Hamlet himself is, because Hamlet not only understands the world around him, to a very large extent, he understands himself. He understands his own foibles. He understands his strengths as well as his weaknesses, particularly his weaknesses. But there is a blind spot, and we all have that blind spot, and that's good writing.